What led to, is there a formation story that you can tell about PitchMark?
Sure. Well, PitchMark was founded really for the same reason that so many creatives, have those frustrations. So many creatives have this story. Everybody seems to have this story. You've come up with an idea, some sort of pitch. Maybe it's a graphic design. Maybe it's a written piece. For some people, it's an architectural drawing. For others, again, it's some sort of sting, musical sting or melody that they've composed. And we all have the same story to tell. We want to do the pitch. We go into the client. We do the pitch with that graphic design, with that melody. The client says, thanks, but we're not so sure. We're still evaluating, or some other sort of stalling technique. And next thing you know, 6 months later, your drawing, your graphic design, your melody has in fact been used. And then it's again the same story. You call the prospective client or the former prospective client and you say, hey, I pitched this idea and now I see you using it in your own billboards. What's going on? And then the client says, we had something very similar planned all along, or some sort of obfuscation along the line. And so as the creative, you then have very limited choices as to what you can do. For most creatives, their number one priority is to create. They're not really all that interested in now, becoming, boning up on all the legalese and hoping to stick it to the prospective client. So you kind of swallow your pride and say, well, I'll be more careful next time. But the fact is that if the client has then used your idea in a big way and is monetizing it possibly even, then obviously that's quite unfair. We still can't expect the creatives to become legal experts, and that's precisely why we're building a global legal network of law firms, lawyers, perhaps boutique lawyers in the intellectual property space, who can then immediately step up based on an existing relationship with our community to say, hey, I'm going to lend you a hand. I'm going to write that letter for you. I'm going to make that phone call. I'm going to do something to support you. And beyond that, I'm going to help you prepare for the next pitch so that this thing doesn't happen again.
So this, so PitchMark then it's not registration of your events, or at least not registration in what we might think of as the traditional registering with the government sense.
Well, in the United States, of course, you have the Copyright Registry, which does not exist in the same form in any other part of the world. And so you're really then left with the goodwill of the prospective client who then kind of looks at your idea, looks at your pitch documents, maybe your PowerPoint slides, or maybe even the drawing, the Photoshop drawing that you've done. And there is simply no structured way in the rest of the world where you can then say, I put my stake in the ground for my idea. And so that's precisely what PitchMark aims to do, is to create that registry. But the registry on its own actually doesn't do very much. The client or the prospective client must get the idea that you value your IP, you understand the value of your IP, and you're prepared to defend it. So it's not necessarily a technology solution that is going to do it. You have to influence, deter the client from doing anything with your idea that they shouldn't. And that's, again, precisely why PitchMark has a variety of features which draws that line in the sand and makes people think twice before they rip off the idea.
So have you had success, or have you had success stories where, the mere existence of PitchMark has indeed led people to not swipe an idea that they might have otherwise done? I don't know if that's something you can quantify, not doing something, but
yes. Well, you're right, that is hard to quantify. Arguably, the success lies in us never having a creative or innovator, as we call them, step forward and say, hey, my idea still got ripped off. I guess the mark of success is when that doesn't happen. But we certainly hear a lot of stories. And as I said earlier, everyone has a story to tell. Everyone, some of the innovators who've registered with PitchMark One of them actually PitchMarked just a presentation document. It was a PowerPoint deck of a presentation that he gave at a conference. And having PitchMarked it, he then went off to the conference and he delivered his deck, only to attend a similar industry event 2 weeks later where somebody else was giving his presentation. And of course, he was like, how could this be? And it turned out that this other person was in fact a member of the audience of his event 2 weeks earlier. So he was then able to wave the PitchMark certificate in his face and say, look, I've registered this, cease and desist, and come to some sort of arrangement. So the whole point of PitchMark is not necessarily to wield the big stick after the fact. The aim is to deter theft of these ideas, but it certainly can work in both directions. And that's just one of many examples that our innovators have shared, where drawing that line in the sand starts a conversation with the prospective client about who owns the IP that otherwise would never have taken place.
That makes a lot of sense. So I can understand the role of, our audience is made up primarily of lawyers, and the role of the lawyer in the wielding the big stick is apparent. And one of the roles you've mentioned for the lawyer in the deterrence perspective, is probably the cease and desist letter. What other roles do lawyers play in PitchMark?
Well, I think we can all agree that prevention is better than the cure. And yet so many innovators, so many people in the creative industries often don't know the first thing about IP. Often they don't even know that they're creating it, or let alone how to defend it. They think they're doing, coming up with a graphic design, or as I said earlier, some sort of jingle. But the fact is that actually that does need to be codified. So the lawyers play a critical role in 3 ways. First, education. By introducing the lawyers to our community before anything happens, there is a chance that the lawyer is able to then work with our community to help to raise the bar, to create a little bit more awareness of what IP is. Second is certainly that deterrence, that by having that lawyer's name on the PitchMark certificate, or by, when you send the pitch document, you're saying, I'm supported by the PitchMark Global Legal Network. And by the way, the law firm that we work with is XYZ law firm. That already puts on the record for the receiving party, the prospective client, that you've thought about it and that you're not a pushover. And then the third aspect is enforcement, where if, again, something untoward happens, our innovators are already in touch with members of the Global Legal Network that we're building and inviting lawyers to, and therefore they immediately have a go-to. They're not then caught in a situation where they're trying to figure out, in that bewildering moment when you see your idea being used without your permission, then going to hunt around for somebody who can help you with that, arguably that's going to be a bit too late. So that's why the education, the deterrence, and the enforcement are so important for the lawyers and for our innovators.
And just to chime in, I think there's also a fourth component that's a little bit more positive looking, and that would be more monetization and commercialization. A lot of our innovators are at points in their career where they're being presented with forward-looking opportunities, maybe to sign a contract or to develop a line of something in registration. And they'd really benefit from having some legal advice early on to help them shape their career rather than just to mop up a mess.
That's an excellent addition. I've got more video than I can use already, so I don't want to take too much more of your time. But one of the things, Frank and I started talking about this several months ago, and one of the things that he mentioned was the eventual creation of a marketplace for matching up innovators with buyers of the things that people are innovating. Is there any, how's that coming? Is that something that's ready to discuss?
Not really, but certainly Frank is absolutely correct. I mean, the fact is that you do have a lot of innovators who create these ideas for prospective clients. So there is already a relationship, but there is certainly a scope for innovators to continue to monetize this. As you'll be aware, and in fact, when you talk to your subscribers, what you'll find is that many of them are quite skeptical of NFTs. Many of them kind of chuckle when you say, you know, how about you lock in the IP with an NFT? And that's possibly because NFTs are relatively new, possibly because arguably it is just a line of code on a computer. But as that industry matures, I'd say you'll find some particularly interesting use cases for NFTs, or as we call them, digital certificates, in order to ensure that your IP is protected. Watch this space.
Okay.